a picture now before we end?
Yeah.
We've got a few still coming on, Jody. So I'm just wondering if we,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we might grab one at some point. Happy Snap. What do you reckon?
Okay. But the session has started recording. So now let's get into the main course. I was talking about how I met Andrew. It was at a business networking event back in March of this year. And we've been in touch ever since then. I feel very privileged to know him as a friend, to call him a friend of mine. And he is one of the smartest people I know. I can easily say that. If you guys check out his LinkedIn profile, you'll see some of the videos he does on almost a daily basis. And they're all, in this month, they've all been geared up around how we learn. So Andrew's big into neuroscience, and he knows quite a lot around how we absorb things into our minds and put them into our short and long-term memory. And it's just amazing. And Andrew's background is in schooling. So he's been an educational leader and coach from the schooling sector. In terms of staying calm under pressure and how our brains respond to pressure, I think we're all in for a treat. I cannot wait. So Andrew, over to you. Let's get started.
Thanks, Has, and thanks for the kind words. It's amazing when you look at the people who are in your life, and I think one of the measures of building resilience is bringing new people into your life constantly. And I've been very lucky this year to meet Has and this group and a number of others. It's been very rich for connections this year. Just before I start, and this won't be some weird meditation session, but I'd love you just to stop and take 3 really long, deep breaths in. Long in, and then long out. And as you go out, just let the air deflate like a tire going down. Then in again one more time. And then let it just drop. And then last time. And intentionally let go when you breathe out. Now that's about as much mindfulness that I'm going to be taking you through today. But 3 brief deep breaths that have intention around them changes your brain almost instantly. And we'll see why in a little while. So one of the tricks, we always talk about taking a deep breath before you start something, but there's more than just oxygen coming into your brain. There's research to show that doing that really affects, as part of your system that creates stress, it affects the vagus nerve in particular, and it does produce some calm. And maybe you feel a little bit more calm now. Generally speaking, we don't breathe well when we're just operating, so we don't pay attention to our breath. So that's the start for today. In many ways, I've primed your brain to be more aware of what's going to be happening just by providing that moment of breath. So let me start the share, and I'm going to share my, if I can find it, my desktop, which will do a weird thing to start with, but give me a chance to come into that. So just a quick thumbs up if you can, from a few of you, you can see my screen. Okay, perfect. Very quickly, I'm going to do about 2 or 3 sprints of some content, and then you're going to do some work in small groups, just making meaning of what I'm saying. What I'm going to take you through today, so that you just don't consume and sit back and be passive with this, but you actually go through this journey of knowing something more, making sense of it, and then integrating that over time into who you are and what you do through the making meaning, and then ultimately making a difference or making impact with this. Now, we can't do the difference or the impact, making a difference or the impact today, largely. It's what you do in taking this out. And one of the things that COVID has done for us is that we consume a load more of these webinars and content online. And it's very easy to Netflix these. In other words, sit back and be entertained. So I'm deliberately going to take you out of consumption into this active path of making sense, and then make meaning and make impact. Now, as a quick setup for the way we'll work today, the way I'll help you make meaning is to break out into rooms. Now, Has will help me do that. And I want you deliberately to focus on 3 questions, and I'll remind you a bit later. So I'm priming your brain with these 3 questions. What are you connecting with In other words, what am I saying that's already in your brain in some way that you know to be something that makes sense to you? What's extending your network and where does it fit? In other words, what's new and where does it belong in the stuff that I know? And that's really that important part of making meaning. Here's a new idea. Where does it belong in my tree of knowledge? And the last one is, here's something and I don't know where it belongs. So what question should I ask to make more meaning of that? It's a really powerful protocol that I use often in my teaching to make sure that people go through and become active. And if you see some of my LinkedIn stuff, this is working with your working memory. And if your working memory doesn't work, which is why it's called working memory, then it doesn't get passed through into your long-term memory. And if it doesn't get through, then today's been entertaining maybe, but not useful or impactful. So we'll come back to that in a little while. Please also reach out and stop me if you want to ask a question. And I will be hanging around at the end just to get into that informal discussion. Happy to take any questions. Another quick frame here before we move into the content is that this will be posted to you as a PDF. So anything you need to capture in terms of notes, I'm happy to, don't worry about trying to scribble things down as they go past. There won't be heaps of words, but I'd more prefer you to connect with your thinking and what's going on and then refer to the slides afterwards rather than try and capture them now. So into that, if that's okay, our brains are set up to do three things. In fact, the brains of most animals, or most mammals in particular, are doing three things all at once. And this is regardless of how modern we are. If you go back to more ancient forms of humankind, solving problems, largely around shelter and food, connecting with others, especially those animals that are, and including us in that, that are social, but even the ones that aren't need to connect with other animals to get involved in reproduction and to survive. And they're the three things that are going on all the time for us as modern humans. We just don't know that they're there. So we've got a very strong focus on solving problems. Now, the problems today are much more extensive and complicated than they were when we led a simpler life. Connecting with others is equally complex, and that's now framed by the whole technological world that we've got around us. But the survival piece is really interesting because what threatens our survival now is very different to what threatened our survival before. So today I'm really taking you through this bottom line here about survival, because this survival algorithm plays out in our brain all of the time. And if it becomes active in a true response to threat in a way that's unhelpful, then it starts to get in the way of lots of things. It will drive our emotions, it will drive our mindset, it will drive where to what we attend. So it will change everything. So the stay calm under pressure is really hitting this survival algorithm and doing its best to manage it down. And I'll show you some ways to do that. So here's your first question. This is an image. I like to use imagery a lot. Your visual systems are much stronger than your auditory system, so I use a lot of visuals. And this is a picture of a boy shining a torch on a very large blackboard full of knowledge. What does this say to you about attention? So I want you to hold this image in your mind and then ask if we can quickly go into the breakout rooms. This is not a Connect Extend challenge. This is simply just, what sense are you making of this image? What does this say to you about attention? And when we come back, we'll throw to some comments about what this says to you about attention, because attention is at the center of this whole thing. So what does this say to you? Take a moment to look at that, and then I'll get Huss to throw you into rooms of three. Person with the surname who is last in the alphabet, kick off and start and manage the session. Okay, Huss, anytime now.
So just confirming, you wanted 3 people per room.
3 people per room. What does this image say to you about attention?
And you want 6 minutes.
Just, no, this one, 3 minutes will be fine.
Sorry, I should have been paying more attention. All right.
I didn't say that one, so that's
Everyone
okay.
gets 60 seconds at the end of that. All right, that should be...
Do we need to bring anything back with us as we come back?
Yeah, just what does this mean to you? What does this image say about attention? That's all, just this single idea. Yeah, so I'm just checking on any others that need to be admitted as well. So I caught a few before, but I've lost some of my screen being in screen share, so I can't see that as much.
Yeah, I can't see that either. Let me just check on that. Everyone should be in here. It's not showing me anyone who's in the waiting room.
That's cool. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so, but just to double check. I've done this before where I've gone well into it, and there've been 3 people waiting because I was managing. It's a bit embarrassing. So.
Now, Zoom has assigned you to room number 3 with 2 others, but you don't have to join.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll let them chat, so that'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a few that haven't connected. Looks like one person's trying to connect. Olga looks like she's struggling to connect.
Yeah, so it's connected to audio. Vinky is still here with us, and Rajinder is also here.
Yeah, that's cool. That's absolutely fine. So what does that say to you, by the way? Just as a quick discussion, what does that say to you?
Oh, for me?
Hmm.
It's reminding me of this thing that knowledge is like shining a torch into a very dark room, and you can never see the whole room, even if you have many lifetimes to live and absorb knowledge. That's what life is all about.
So to shift that to right now in the very moment, this is actually what it means to be present in that sense. And whatever your attention is shining on, that's the inbound sensory input that makes it through into your awareness. So,
Right. Yeah.
so therefore, and the spin-off from that is that it is what you don't shine your torch on does not come into your awareness. So in terms of what you shine your torch on around emotions in particular and frames of reference, that will determine how, not only what you see, but how you see it. So, so that's the key takeaway from this.
That's nice. I like it. Now, something I should have done, I should have just set aside 2 minutes for this, because once these 3 minutes are up, everyone gets an extra 60 seconds.
Yeah, that's okay. We can pull that one back in a second.
Or I can actually close all rooms anyway. I have.
Yeah, just close now. Probably is easy. I think most people would have. So I might come out of. Oh no, I'll leave it in that. So I'm going to see if anyone wants to come off mute or chat. We've got a large enough group to chat.
Yeah.
Keep that chat window open. So welcome back. Just as you're coming back in, looks like we've got some but not all back yet. Keen to see what that image has done for your understanding of attention. So I'm waiting to hear if there's someone who'd love to come off mute, or if you want to write something in the chat, just something that's a standout for you, something new that appeared for you in understanding what attention is. Anyone willing to come off mute and answer that one? If you don't come off mute, I might accidentally pick you out.
Okay.
Alan, away you go. You put your hand up, so I saw you straight away.
I'll start with sort of a brief summary of our group. It's like there's the chaos and the focus on what is in there. What else do we need to look at? There's so much there. What do we pull in on? And then there's a slightly sort of narrower version on that. You've got something that sticks out to me as the globe, and yet there's a focus point on something specific. It raised the question, what is it that pulls us from, wow, there's so much here, where do I go, to actually focusing on that one thing and our attention being there?
Really nice. Really nice. So I'm going to let a few more summaries come through, and then I'll pull the threads of those summaries together. Cool, Kate. Lasagna, if you can share that around, that'd be great. Kate's just shared that she's got lasagna on the boil. Anyone else that came up with, Eugenia, I can see you smiling there. I'm sorry to pick on you a bit today, but you've got a fabulous smile there. It looks like you might have picked on something. What did you find in that imagery?
So I was actually in the same room with Alan. I think he summarized it really well. I just had to smile because I just all of a sudden like another thought came through me, and I thought it's just really interesting that a lot of times like we almost pay attention to something like intuitively, like it's like I'm in this Zoom meeting, so like automatically my attention just goes to my screen and maybe my room. And I think we often neglect that, apart from what we're choosing to focus on or pay attention to, which sometimes just happens, I think, naturally. There's this whole world out there that, and what we're paying attention to or what we choose to pay attention to is really just a fraction of what is actually happening. So,
that's such a good reply, that I want to just focus on an element of that, and that's our attention is massively, massively limited compared to what we expect it to be. Some research suggests that, and I talk about this being like a pipeline, and this massive amount of, I can't do it so you can see the screen, massive amount of sensory input coming in, we pick up less than 1% of the sensory inbound data. So if this was a computer system with inbound data, then the system that attends to what's coming in can only capture about 0.7% of that inbound data. So the metaphor, your attention is like the torch beam, and anything your torch beam does not land on does not land into your awareness. Now, there are some, attention is massively complex in its own right and is connected to many different systems. So something can be subconsciously drawing your attention without knowing it. Sometimes it's obvious, there's overt and covert. So I can be listening to Huss at a party, but I'm trying to listen to the conversation behind. That's covert attention. And if Huss asked me a question in the middle of that, I might think, heck, do I say yes or no? Because I wasn't attending. So I cannot attend to more than one auditory stream and talking stream at once. So if you're writing something right now as a note, you lose a sense of what I'm saying. So attention is very, very, very narrow and very precious, I must say. It's precious from the point of view that it is the basis of all learning. Anything that doesn't end up in the attention stream doesn't get passed through to working memory, so you don't learn it. But it's also the basis for how you play out emotions, because shining your torch on an input that might trigger emotion will not only tell you what you're focusing on, but how you might frame that. And today we'll talk about that. So attention really is at the seat of calm under pressure. Managing attention is really at the center of it. It also, by the way, attention is the basis for the quality of relationship and conversation. So the more you attend, the quality and quantity of attention on the other person as you're speaking will determine the degree to which the quality itself is measured, if you like. And if you don't attend the right way in a relationship, then the relationship suffers, as does the conversation. And we all know that to be the case. So let's just go through then to seeing how that attention gets managed in the brain. So a little bit of neuroscience there. Now I'm just getting a little bit of background noise. I wonder if you can pick that up for me. So I'm quite happy for people to come off mute, but if you're not in the middle of talking, let's just stay off you to improve the signal to noise ratio. Because what it does for a Zoom session, by the way, is that when noises pop up, it's an attentional distractor. And that our bandwidth is very small, of course. So one of the roles we have in training is to manage the attention of our participants, much harder in a digital environment, a virtual environment like this. So let's have a quick look at this. And I want to explain this from a brain-based point of view, then you'll understand it. And then at the end of this little piece, I'm going to get you to consider those three questions. What are you connecting with? What's new for you? And what's still a bit of a block? So side on through a brain like this, the brain is massively complex. But what I want you to see is that there are a couple of sort of sections here, and I'm going to try and draw on this. So we've got a sort of an area around here, and we've got a layer through the middle here, and then we've got this piece around over the top. And these three layers form the idea of what's called a triune brain or a tripartite brain. Now this model is beginning to not hold up anymore, but it's useful to consider these different functional areas. Now, in reality, every part of the brain is actively involved in everything, but these areas dominate particular things. So the top layer, the cognitive layer, that sort of folded layer over the top, is very much about our consciousness, thought, language in particular. On the left side, we've got a lot of architecture that both creates language and interprets language and converts that into stuff that helps us know more or helps us respond and create speech. This is massively dominant in the cognitive brain and is a very important part. Your thinking happens at this top level of the brain. In the middle, that sort of curly, almost question mark thing is the hippocampus, and that's where a lot of learning and memory and emotions in other parts here. There's a little thing down here called the amygdala right around there. This is the emotional center of the brain as well. These parts of the brain are below language. We don't experience language in this part of the brain, but we experience emotion. And then down at the back, this sort of area around here is the cerebellum, which is it's a very ancient part of the brain, and it's where a lot of survival stuff sits, including the brainstem around this area. That's where our automatic breathing and heart rate lives. But things like habits and doing stuff automatically is managed by the cerebellum. And in large ways, stuff that keeps us alive is in that space. So up at this top level here, this prefrontal cortex, that's the massively important part of the brain socially, managing our goals, our plans, connecting with people, managing an executive control over lots of things, and also language and thinking and solving problems live up in this space. So when we combine those, we get a sense of which part of the brain is dominant. And we know this to be the case by measuring where blood flow goes. And there's an idea in science that if the blood is flowing more to an area than another part, then that's the active part of the brain. So I'll be talking about locus of control here. And you can see the colors, and the colors relate to what I call blue zone and red zone. And red zone's all about survival. Blue zone's all about engagement. The blue zone is leaning into something, engaging. I would argue largely now all in our blue zone. But if I was to say something or do something that was threatening, then your survival architecture gets involved and starts to do stuff to your biology. Now, this biology is all about our non-modern world, our ancient world. And the crazy thing is it's a maladaptation. So if we're walking on the savannah with a group of people, and our goal that we're after, which is managed by the prefrontal cortex, is to find food, and we hear rustling in the grass next to us, that rustling triggers the vigilance part of our brain, and that starts to cause us to attend to danger or possible danger. And what that does from a biology point of view is it shifts the blood flow away from our visceral gut system into our muscles. It increases stress hormones called cortisol. It increases our threshold of pain. And it does other things like gives us a bit of a dry mouth. All of those things, if I was to ask you to jump off, this would be the scariest thing for me, jump off a tall bridge with a rubber band tied around my ankles, that would cause my biology to go extremely into this threat mode. For some people, it's getting up and talking. For me, if it was, instead of talking, here's a microphone, sing something for us, that would shift my biology from being calm to being threatened almost instantly. And that biology, when someone does something to us that causes our threat architecture to get involved, then it has the impact of doing, I need to get out of draw mode now, into this state. Let me move that one. I'm still in draw mode. Please go out of draw mode now. There we go. Just a little. So on the right-hand side, it causes me to go into this state that's all about me. It's about me and my survival. It reduces my situational awareness and it reduces my self-management and choice. And there's a word that I've dropped off the bottom here, which I can just quickly fix by doing that. So choice becomes less available. And in fact, when you watch people who are in this early threat state, two things go on. First of all, if there's a loud noise or something unusual that happens, I love those Japanese prank videos. If there's one that you can see, it's a bunch of a man walking up a road with a briefcase, and then all of a sudden a big crowd comes around and runs towards him. And the first thing that happens is that you stop and you assess and you think, crap, what the hell's going on? And then secondly, you move into, crap, I better do something, and then run. And that's what people do. When you hear a loud noise, you pause, you look, is that dangerous? Yes, it is, go. So we go into flight or fight. This is a place all about survival. It's not about learning and growth and engagement. And so if we're presented with certain situations and this part of the brain becomes much more active than the other part, then we reduce our capacity to be socially oriented, reduce our capacity to learn, we become more selfish, we become less generous, and we can't see as many options that were open to us before because our attention, and I'll show you this in a second, narrows. So when we're in a very threatening situation, our attention beam becomes a red laser beam rather than a broad torch beam, if that makes sense. So our job in education and our job in staying calm under pressure, but our job as humans is to reduce the impact of our red zone over time and increase the impact of our blue zone, because the blue zone is much more about us, you or us. It's that place where we can use our thinking, our awareness, our consciousness to assess how we're feeling and make some choices about, is that the best way to do things? So we become much more aware of ourselves and we become much more highly self-managing. And you know, if you read anything about emotional intelligence, the two cornerstones of emotional intelligence are self-awareness and self-management. Self-awareness comes first. What comes before self-awareness? Attention. And for us to be consciously in control of our attention, we cannot be in a threat state. So what we've got to do is come out of that threat state and move much more into a place where we can use our torch beam ourselves rather than the automatic part of our brain grabbing the torch and focusing on the thing that's scary. So that's the broad approach. A couple of final points here, but the main things are, this is not about happy or sad, angry and calm. Less that, then its threat state is I'm self-centered, not much awareness, low self-management choice. When I'm in this blue zone state, it's much more about you, or in fact us, and I'm much more aware and I can manage and I can see choices. So this is, now what I need to do is clear all my drawings, get rid of that. And this is what happens in road rage, because road rage is very much a great example. And I first started driving here in Singapore. I'm not sure if you're aware, I'm in sunny Singapore. It's a fabulous place to live and work. One of the things, though, that is interesting is the driving culture is quite different to that in Australia. And when I first came here, I noticed myself really zeroing in on what was unacceptable driving behaviour, certainly unacceptable in my frame of reference to the way that I grew up as a driver in Australia. Now, that's not to judge people as drivers here, that's just my own response to what I'm saying. And I had to really quickly, after a week of driving, because I didn't drive in Singapore for quite some time, I had to stop and say, I can't keep driving like this. This is really impacting on my whole emotional state. And I'll show you later on how I shifted that. But when someone does something like cutting the lane in front of you, you might notice that you do this. What you do is you zero in and you just watch that car. You don't watch the other stuff that's going on. And then what happens is you try and catch up to it. And if you can, you pull up next to it so that you can look at the driver and at least make eye contact and let them know that, hey, hang on, what you did there wasn't all that good. I don't know if any of you are responding, yeah, I do that. If your anger is worse than that, then maybe you might show a sign or two, or maybe even say something. But definitely what's happening to your attention is it's zeroing in. But in a blue zone state, you can see much more. You can see more than just that car. You can see your rear view and you can see your dashboard. You can see the metrics of how you're responding. And so all of these form inputs to what's going on. So good drivers are actually blue zone drivers. So time has to make a stop and go into our groups of 3. One of you might have a group of 2 because that would normally have me as a co-host. So pardon me, I'm staying out of the room so I can keep them clean. You can just chat as you need to. So the frame here is to consider, what are you making sense of in terms of red zone, blue zone? Is that landing for you as something that you intuitively know? What's something new that's popping up that you didn't quite realize before? It's become more obvious to you now. And what questions might you have? Connect, extend, challenge. Huss this time, let's just make it 5 minutes if that's possible, because that will give the extra minute for the 6. So into your breakout rooms, red zone, blue zone, what are you connecting with, what's new, and what's a question.
All right, the rooms are open. Oh, and we have a few people who are not assigned. So Hannah, Jill, Priya, and Satya, I'm just going to assign you to some of these rooms. Looking for rooms that have 2 people each. So room 3. And room 7. Priya and Satya, you guys are going to room 7. All right, now we should have every room with 3 people in them.
So I can see I'm a little bit behind time too, Huss. So we'll continue as we can.
Okay.
This is the one of the 2 primary ideas. So the second one we'll come to in a second.
When people come back, do you want me to check in with them if it's okay to go over time, 15 minutes?
We'll do that closer to the top, and we'll do the usual Matt Church thing that if people need to go, that's fine, just jump off. But I'll try and deliver most of the value before then if we can.
Okay, sounds good. Jyoti's dad, welcome aboard. Good to see you here. You don't have to join any of the breakout rooms, but hopefully you're enjoying the session today.
Yes, and hopefully my Aussie accent isn't too too difficult to understand.
Jyoti did message me that you're still trying to work the laptop out. So if you want to unmute yourself, you look for the mute, the icon that looks like a mic at the bottom left of your screen. And if you click on that, that'll unmute you.
So have you seen that model before, Huss?
I may have, but a long time ago. So you're talking about the red zone, blue zone?
Yeah.
You're not in this way now.
So that's one of my first models I came up with. That would have been 2006. And
Right.
In pulling together social, affective neuroscience, so the social, emotional neuroscience piece. And it was after a bit of listening to some neuroscientists, working with a guy called David Rock, whose books I recommend,
Okay.
and pulling together this model that gives people, the idea really is to give people a frame of reference, some easy language to start to self-describe, I'm in this state or I'm in that state, because that's one of the primary tools to use this for. So in saying to yourself, I'm in a red zone state, that actually reduces the impact of the red zone state, because ironically, to say I'm in a red zone state requires blue zone architecture, and whatever you use causes the blood to flow back to that area. So if you describe, it's called affect labeling. If you start to describe your emotion in a short, non-detailed way, representative way, then it reduces the impact of that emotion. So people tend to adopt this quite quickly when they see it as a model. This was part of the book that I wrote 10 years ago. So
That's amazing. Hey, is David Rock the guy who wrote Your Brain at Work?
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
him, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I've read a summary of his book. Really impressive stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
good.
work with him,
Yeah, I was trained as a coach by him.
right?
So I picked him back in 2005 when he still was doing coach training. And then I ended up being an assistant trainer to him when he was delivering corporate training. And he runs the Neuro Leadership Institute. So I'm no longer a part of that network. For a while, I was starting to shape up to be an associate of his group. Things conspired or transpired that didn't end up happening.
Right, okay.
But and that's something offline that we can talk about.
So you're still in touch with them?
From time to time.
Okay.
His Brain at Work's just been recently updated. 2012 originally written. It's been updated this year with some new research. But the whole idea of using brain-based, that's what reignited my love for the brain, was becoming a coach as a part of a brain-based approach. And that's where this whole love of neuroscience and metacognition really came back.
I like that. Okay, so the time's almost up. For the next breakout session, if you want me to send a broadcast message out to everyone in the middle, let me know. And
Yep. Cool.
Should we give everyone an extra minute or bring them back in?
Nah, bring them back in if you can. So.
Let's do it. Oh, so even when I click on close, it still gives them an extra 60 seconds, right?
Okay, that's cool.
Which is fair enough to them. Otherwise, it's too much power to the host.
Yeah, true. This is where I still like Remo, I think, as a piece. I love Remo to develop an app for training or a version of what they do for training. But yeah, that's.
Did they ever get
tried
back?
suggesting it to them.
Did they get back to you on your query?
No, it was turned off a few times because it was taken through the support channel and it just didn't land with the right people. But that's okay. That's cool. So,
all right. So, welcome back, guys. Can you please mute yourselves if you haven't already? And then we will continue as soon as all the rest of the participants are back. I think they're having a good chat over there in their rooms. The number goes back up to 25. All right, everyone's back in. Guys, please mute yourself and then we will continue.
So welcome back, everyone, and thanks, Haas. What I will get you to do is to throw anything that was an insight as a quick comment into the chat. I'm just mindful of time and delivering the other valuable piece of content to today. And while I'd love to have a deeper conversation about red zone, blue zone, let's have the learning conversation about that once we've gone into the finish of this session. But what I will do is call for any burning questions around clarity. If there's anyone who needs something to be clarified in that discussion, now's the time quickly to jump on and ask that question. Otherwise, I'll continue into, okay, so what do we do with that bit of information? All good? Thumbs up.
I just had
a
quick question, Andrew.
Go for it.
So for me, Christine and myself were in the room 5 and we were discussing about the red zone and the blue zone. And how do you see the best state someone would be in? Is it all in the blue zone kind of thing? We were thinking like we sometimes, we understood the scenario like Christine was mentioning that sometimes we fall so much deep into a problem that if we focus on those problems, we might not come out and see what all the positive things happening around. So do you think that blue zone will be the perfect zone around us?
Yes, you can be focused without being in the red zone. So focus is okay and flow is another part of that. For me, one thing I didn't mention that's appropriate to mention now is that kids are born with an active red zone. They come out into the world with a red zone well developed and no blue zone. Kids don't start to have the architecture sitting there ready until they're starting to approach 8 or so years old. That's when they start to understand. You'll recognize this if you've got kids. Kids who are in this pre-blue zone state do not understand the impact of their behavior on other people or the impact of other people's behavior on them. And 6-year-old boys are a classic example of that. My boy here is approaching, he's just after 11 now, and he's still developing this whole piece of connecting the impact of behavior on each other. Boys are often slower. The research would show that you don't complete maturation of this, and girls are faster than this, until mid-20s or later. So blue zones take a while to get up to speed and to develop. The other key piece I didn't give you before is that red zones are massively contagious. So if I right now all of a sudden got upset with Haas, banged the table and started pointing the finger at him and did stuff, all of you would catch that red zone, which means that if I am demonstratively red zoning about something, then I am causing other brains to go into that state, even if I'm trying to suppress it and trying to keep it quiet. So if I'm really peed off and I walk into a room with my jaw clenched and I try and hide it, others will detect it and it will reduce the culture in the room. So red zones for teams are toxic. So coming around through those 2 points to you, blue zone is the answer. I know 2 people in my life, only 2 people, probably 2.75, because Haas to me is someone who's beautifully calm every time I connect with him. But I know 2 other people who are authentically, beautifully calm 100% of the time. I'm not saying you're not authentic, Cass, but I'm not quite, all of us, I know I've got a good red zone, and it appears at home or with William here most often. That's kids who trigger our red zone more than anything. So I'm going to talk to you about how we might manage that down. But definitely the goal is to be as calm and in that state. You can be energetic, by the way, and still be relatively calm. You can be blue zone and have some energy behind it. You can discuss stuff that is conflicting, but still stay relatively blue. Quick story, my wife, who's Chinese, and I put together a bit of furniture recently, and this furniture came with really bad instructions. It was like the Chinese version of, it was bought from China, but like the Chinese version of IKEA. And the instructions were really bad. The pictures were almost impossible to discern what part went where. And with both of us not strong in each other's language, we had to work out what the hell was going on. Now, we had some energetic discussions, but throughout the time, we remained, even with a bit of humour, in a relatively calm place. And no, that's not the way. Yes, no, I disagree. It was that sort of discussion, but it never got personal and never got red zone. And our red zones weren't triggered. And we created the furniture, and there's only one bit of wood left over. So we're fine. It hasn't fallen over yet. So that's where this blue zone plays out. If you're prone to falling into that state where you start to judge someone and say stuff that might be perceived as judged, then you trigger this threat response. So you can be energetic about pushing ideas around and disagreeing without actually moving into or triggering threat states. And that takes some skill over time. Does that answer the question, Rashida?
Yes, it does. Thanks,
Blue
Andrew.
zone is best.
Blue zone.
I've got to say it in 3 words. So how do you do that? I was just saying to Huss before, so where I'm going to take you now is a couple of ideas of how to move forward with this. And these are 2 key ways of building your capacity for calm. One is this idea of naming entertainment. And this comes from emotional literacy, and it also comes from the neuroscience of affect labeling. So this is based on evidenced neuroscience. It's not something that is popular science, but it does have evidence. And if you want to see that, I can send you the research that's built around this. And what that says is, if you name something yourself that is an emotion, that is symbolic in some way or representative in a metaphorical way, analogous way of your emotional state, you're using your blue zone architecture to do this. Whatever you use in your brain causes blood flow to move to that part of your brain. So if you're in this red zone state and you say, oh, I'm feeling so frustrated at the moment, that's all you say. To say that, you're using your blue zone, and therefore stuff comes back. Your blood starts to come back into the blue zone architecture, which reduces the impact of that red zone emotion.
Andrew.
Remembering, sorry, yep.
Michael here.
Yeah, Michael.
You talked about all kids have a red zone. Is the blue zone, does it appear as you get just naturally age, or is it something that requires effort to be poured in to develop? So do some people will always stay in a red zone, or will everyone go towards this control and move into a blue zone sort of thing?
Really good question. And my view is that there's some nurture nature stuff going on. So some people are born with the genetics that predispose them to being more calm or not. And there are some who are exposed to environments that help them develop blue zone or not. So if you're built up in a toxic environment, if you're if you grow up in a toxic environment where people are shouting, hitting, triggering your threat architecture all of the time, then you grow up with an active red zone as a result of it, which is one reason we say that corporal punishment, is it the right word? But smacking kids, particularly here in Asia, there's still this idea that it's okay to beat kids with a bit of a stick from time to time. That's a part of the culture of, now I'm not judging that, but the science would say that's not helpful. Same within schools. That's the reason we stop this in schools. So you can have this predisposition to one of the 2 states, and then you can have this culture and this environment in which you grow up, home and school largely, that will help that development further. There's a lot of development in mindfulness in schools now, and mindfulness is one way of building calm capacity. So this whole approach to the person and their needs, being attended to, being listened to, given respect, given empathy, these all build this ability to stay calm under pressure. It's a complex route that we go through because of that uniqueness of our brain, but the path is pretty constant. So yes, I think it does take deliberate attention, particularly if you've got someone who's a bit nervy. My son here, William, is very touchy he's very scared of anything that moves. And he gets that from his mum. We have some very funny times at home from time to time. And I'm trying to teach him this whole approach of reframing his approach to what he sees on the wall. He might think that this bee that's coming to the house is there to attack him. That's the second part of this piece here, reframing the story, because that frame, this bee is in here to attack me, simply serves to increase his response to that as a fearful response. And what I'm trying to do is build his awareness that there are different ways to approach that. Does that answer the question?
Can I add something else to that question?
Yeah, of course, Fernando. Go for it.
Apologies, I need to just interject quickly. Andrew, it looks like we will go over time a little bit, so I just want to check in with everyone if that is okay with them. Perhaps we might go till 10 or 15 minutes past 6. Can I just get a show of thumbs up, please? I'll scroll through.
Yeah, perfect. Good.
Sounds good. All right.
And if you do have a time commitment, just jump off when you need to, and we can show you the recording. So that's fine. Go for it, Fernanda.
Okay, thanks. I would like to know if mental health disorders or issues can affect also this development of the blue zone, or how easily can you switch between those?
It's a really pertinent point as well, because you can get into a new, this soup of neurotransmitters that we have. I haven't really spoken about the internal environment of the brain with constant exposure to stress or extreme exposure through the PTSD type of situation, where if you're shown something that's, or you're in the middle of something that's traumatic, can change both the way the brain wires itself and the way it responds through its neurotransmitter soup, if you like, so that it's much harder to pull yourself out of things in a self-agency, self-resilient way. And sometimes medications are needed. Sometimes CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, helps. But the brain is massively complex. It's nowhere near as simple as the model I've just shown you. But it does mean that things that you're exposed to, particularly stress that's chronic, will put you in a situation that's much harder to dig yourself out of the hole. And that's where this whole self-care and the whole thing around COVID and being stuck in places is really impacting heavily on mental health. So this is not just, come on, do a couple of deep breaths and you'll be fine. Shape up, you'll be good. It's nowhere near that. You can be in a situation that needs a lot of care and intervention to pull yourself back into a state that's helpful for you and helpful for others. Yeah. So the caveat that's here is that sometimes you need to recognize this in people, and there does need to be a paramedical or medical intervention to help people, for sure. It's a really good question. It's a little bit like Michael's question before, and it's about predisposition, but people who come back from wars, for instance, are very, very prone to mental health issues. And that's because the stress and the trauma really changes the brain in a way that's not helpful for the future. So, yeah, this is just giving you a frame of reference through which you can work. So just briefly on this, because I want to show this other idea for you, and maybe this will extend into if there's enough interest in this. We'll talk about what we can do afterwards, but there might be a deeper dive session where we can look into a couple of these ideas and really get some value out of it. Reframing the story is the other piece I was just drawing to there. Here in Singapore, the F-15s and F-16s fly quite often. I try and do a lot of recording. I try and find quiet places. Went to a beautiful place on Sunday, and a lady with her child who's screaming turns up. And I think my first response was, "Man, don't you know that I'm here recording?" And of course they don't. They're just coming into a nice place But I had to stop and think, no, that's not a helpful way to think about it. They're just here enjoying the park, and the child needs some assessment and some help. So I just stopped and waited and took some breaths. If I allow myself to follow the narrative that whatever is happening around me is not helping, and it's intentional, that people are doing this deliberately to me just to annoy me, then it takes me down a response path that increases my red zone. So reframing something, even if the reframe is not accurate, is helpful. So you can reframe things quite well. And an exercise that I had for you, which we won't do now, is to look at these images, how you might reframe the story that's going on here. Because the capacity to reframe is a really emotionally intelligent piece of work. So first thing is to come back to these 2 points here. Name it to tame it is about emotional literacy. And being able to see things from a different perspective. And the trigger question here is, how can I see things differently? To be reflective enough where you can stop and look at what's going on. So that requires some blue zone to be active, because if you're too far into being emotively energetic, and then maybe you can't stop and be reflective. But once you get into the point where you can start to think again, because when you're in that high red zone, you can't really think at all, then you stop and reframe with this question, how can I see things? There's a beautiful quote here which pulls this out, that change the way you look at things and the things you look at change. And that's Wayne Dwyer's quote, really, really powerful. So those two techniques, if that's all you take from today, build your emotional literacy and then build your capacity to see things differently from a different perspective, then you'll start to improve your capacity to be calm. Any questions from that so far?
I have a question. This is Joanna. So I want to ask, like, if maybe this is kind of related to what you was explaining. So something what I do is like when I am in an uncomfortable position, and as you was in the park, like first, my first reaction is to get annoyed, but then I start thinking, putting myself on their shoes, and then for example, the mom, what happened and all that. So then I trying to understand the other part, but I wanted to know if this is kind of related to like how you are saying, reframe the story is kind of.
It's a beautiful strategy, and it's emotionally intelligent, because what it does, it recognizes, first of all, you've done in saying that you recognize I'm annoyed, but then secondly, you step away from that and then reframe your intention onto the other person, what's happening for you. And that's the generosity of this blue zone space. If you're just a red zone person, you'll bang the table and you'll just get annoyed, and people will see that and they'll become scared of you and they won't talk very much. But when you can hold the space, hold being annoyed, you don't have to do anything with it. You can say, there it is, I'm annoyed. There's that little space inside my brain. That's my heart, or wherever it is, that's it. It's annoyed. I'm observing it. Observing is the key rather than being in the annoyed. And then you can hold it there and make the question, so what's going on for you in this space? And that's a really powerful statement. You've just embodied that whole emotional intelligence piece that sits around blue zone. For some people, that's not an easy strategy. And some of the coaching I do is about building people's capacity to gently not engage with the emotion, to watch it. And then the second step is to shift your attention and awareness to the other person. It's a really good example. Special thing.
So then that is considered like a kind of another technique, what I was saying now, or how it's called that?
I'd call that a strategy, not a technique. I like the word strategy. It's a great strategy. A technique is a little bit like something you do to someone, whereas a strategy is a really good coping strategy. And you've just given a great example of how it is you can take that reframe, ask a good question, and what's happening here for you? What I see is this, what I note in, you can say, look, what I'm going through at the moment, I'm just going through a moment of being a bit annoyed about this, but I'd like to put that aside for a moment and learn more about what's happening for you. So you can acknowledge, and acknowledging your emotion is one of the main strategies. People who suppress their emotions and say, I can't feel annoyed now, it's not the place to feel annoyed. It's like holding a big, those air-filled water balls that you play with in the pool. It's like trying to hold a basketball, if you like, under the water. It takes energy to hold underwater. And then, of course, you can only do that so long, and then you let go, and it shoots up and pops up with lots of energy and lots of splash. That's like the emotions splashing back out. So don't try and hold your emotions under the water.
Yeah.
Just let them float and say, there it is. If I can say this with being, I'm pissed off, or I'm sad about that. Well, emotional literacy is part of the key there, because that helps you name that emotion. There it is on the table. And then you can shift and reframe once you've done that. So really, really nice example.
Thank you.
I'm going to quickly show you one extra model. We may not go to breakout, but I want to finish with this because this starts to make a bit more sense. And it's valuable to show you because red zone, blue zone is more the what. This is a bit of the why. And it's a lovely model. And Hass and I were talking about David Rock. David Rock's Your Brain at Work. A lot of my heritage came from work I did with David when he taught me to become a coach. And this model, which you may or may not have heard of before, is called the SCARF model, SCARF. And I use it all of the time, personally, intrapersonally and interpersonally. And as I'm describing some of these, one of these will be you. And I'm only going to touch on this briefly, just watching the time. Then we might look at which one of these land for you. And then we'll wrap up with some questions, and I'll stay online to talk about this more openly. But what this does is that these are 5 neurologically measured elements or domains that trigger a red zone or a blue zone. So if you imagine, if you get all 5 of these, if you get given all of these, you stay in a blue zone, you're in a blue zone state. If one of these gets taken away, then it starts to trigger the threat architecture. If 2 get taken away, you're a bit more frumpy. If all of them get taken away, you're in a very bad state. And that's where people become very demonstratively difficult to deal with. People who are difficult customers often respond because they've had all of these kicked off or taken away. Status is about where I belong and how well am I doing. And I can refer you to documents that support this, and maybe it's another discussion another day that can help you deepen your understanding about this. Computer games are a great example of status. You always try and beat your best score. And when you get a high score, you get a nice little reward in the brain that says, yeah, my status has gone up because I'm better than I was before. It's about being better than. Better than you is the low form, and it's not really important as much as we think. It's more about how better am I compared to this time yesterday, last week, last month. If Huss said to me, wow, Andrew, you did a really great job. It's better than I saw you did last time. I get a nice reward in my brain. However, if someone says, I got some feedback for you, and you get placed further down in an assessment than where you might expect or hope, then it creates a threat. So you can see the whole world of feedback's just opened up in front of us there. Certainty is another one. And certainty is very much about knowing where we're going with this. And if you're not sure why I'm saying all of this stuff and where we're going with this, and you didn't really want to be here anyway, then I would be triggering a certainty threat in your brain. Our brains are prediction machines. We like to know what's going to happen next. And certainty is definitely something we need. Certainty is related in some ways to rules. And when we have rules, we know how to behave. So within a team, if we create certainty about ways of working, then people stay calm because they tend to apply themselves to those ways of working. And when someone doesn't respond to that, then that can trigger a threat response in us. That's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm racing through very quickly. I had some experiments we could play on you, but we might leave those for another time. Autonomy is the A in SCARF. Really important to be able to make a choice. So if you've been told to come onto this webinar and you're not sure what the subject's about or how it relates to you, then I'm triggering both certainty and autonomy, and you'll be grumpy about being here. So sometimes in a workplace, when we tell people get on that training, and people don't know why they're in the training and they had no choice, then autonomy gets triggered, and very strongly so. For those of you in Melbourne would recognise all of a sudden that that's my football team. And the weird thing is this is about relatedness, being in the tent or out of the tent, in the tribe, opposing a different tribe. The weird thing is if someone else here in Singapore sees me wearing a Richmond shirt and they yell out, "Go Tigers," we feel this immediate moment of affinity between us because we both identify with 2 colours that identified this team. So relatedness is a very powerful model and need in our social structure. And if you exclude someone, bully someone, ignore someone, or break trust with someone, then you cause a relatedness threat situation. If you leave someone out of an email or a meeting, they'll get peed off because you didn't include them. And the last one of these is fairness. We like to have access, and fairness is about access to what we need, not all getting the same. We organise ourselves in ways around fairness that are really important. So queues form because he who comes first or she who comes first will get served first. That's the idea of fairness. Now, a very quick answer here. All of these, and Huss, we talked about this last time I was on this video here, these are very strongly shown to be experienced by animals too. So the one on the right, that's the blanket drop and a horse responding to a blanket drop. The uncertainty of my owner or my friend was there before, now they're not, what the hell's going on? And monkeys responding to fairness in a very, very amusing way. So if you want to get access to those videos, have a bit of a YouTube search. So those 5 things, 1 or 2 of those will be things that you have a preference for getting a hold of. Some people really love certainty. Some people really need autonomy. Others need to be in a group. And so knowing your own preference in this case will help you understand what will tend to drive your red zone or blue zone. So while those 2 strategies of emotional labeling and reframing still stand, this gives you a bit more of a finer view of what domain might you need to work on in that space. So as a quick finish up on this one, and I'm quite happy to run another session on this SCARF piece alone. You can see there's a lot of depth involved in this. It's a useful model, and I'll distribute some resources on SCARF and books that you can find this in. I've got a nice PDF from David Rock's neuro leadership organisation that looks at the neuroscience behind this model. Then we can talk about that. But does anyone want to just reference or call out something that they know they respond to strongly here that is a trigger or a need?
I think certainty and fairness for myself.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see who that was. I didn't have the gallery view up. Who was that?
Christine.
Oh, Christine, perfect. So yeah, so you're responded to fairness in particular. What situations trigger unfairness? What do you notice unfairness a lot, or can you think of a situation that where you respond to this fairness need?
Yeah, I think it's like wanting others to be treated fairly, wanting myself to be treated fairly, wanting animals to be treated fairly, and so noticing that I'll sort of get a bit worked up if I notice unfairness happening, and there's sort of like not understanding why. Like I can't sort of accept this unfairness.
It's visceral, isn't it?
Yeah.
I watched Collingwood versus West Coast to call out a bit of local sport. And early in the game, there was a free kick given against the West Coast, the home side. And I won't go into the details other than that same situation appeared later against potentially a Collingwood player, and the umpire did not call it. And the crowd just went boo for minutes and minutes. So this was a whole group response to fairness. Wow. And you see it every day in sport, of course. So knowing that means that when you interact with people, that's what you ask of people, but it's also what you give. And one of the big insights with this is if you lead a team, I had a head teacher say to me, I suddenly realized I need autonomy. So my senior leadership team, that's what I give them, autonomy. But what they need is certainty. So a whole disconnect that was going on with awareness, and red zones were being created in his team because people didn't want the autonomy, they wanted certainty. And some of these go together. Rules are about certainty, but reducing autonomy. So I can't do anything I want because I have to follow rules. So principles give us a bit more wriggle room, and that also calls out fairness. It's not fair that you break the rule and I stay within the rules. So queue jumping and bad behaviour on the roads often trigger fairness. So if you're someone who responds to road rage a bit. Not that I'm saying you are, Christine, but if you're prone to being agitated on the roads, it's often the fairness piece. Here's another little fairness one. You let someone in and they don't acknowledge you. So acknowledgement is a really powerful one. Acknowledgement says status, I see you there and I thank you for what you did. And that's fair, and that's we're related. So when you let someone in, you open a door for someone, they just walk straight through, then they've hit you for status, they've hit you for relatedness, and they've hit you for fairness. That's not fair. I opened the door for you. Just thank you would have been nice. That's an example of red zone trigger that pops up as a result of something happening socially. So
certainty, there's in the chat group, people are putting in there's things. Certainty seems to be big on everyone's mind right now, which is not surprising, followed by fairness and autonomy.
Yeah. And they're the most common ones. Certainty is a very, very big one. So giving people certainty helps people stay calm, getting certainty from a situation. And I was talking with Hasari today about navigating a bit of an uncertain time in the stuff that I'm trying to organize and focus on in my business. And I'm not quite sure if what I'm trying to do is matching what people I am, but how do I respond to the world and what it needs from me is a part of that uncertainty. And of course, COVID, if you look at COVID, what it's done, it's kicked off every one of those. So sometimes, it's certainly taken away autonomy, certainly taken away certainty, hit status if you've lost a job. You're not connecting with people in the way we were before. And this is not fair in so many different ways. There's a quick example of what the world's done to us. I'm going to stop there. Apart from this last slide now, this is how to stay calm. And there's a lot of stuff that's biological. So first of all, sleep. That's the quickest way to become not calm, is not to sleep. Breathe. And breathing and breath is very important. I think I should have put an E on the end of the word of breathe, because it looks like breath. Hydrate and eat well, have good nutrition, and make sure you're not dehydrated, and exercise. Exercise is a massive manager of stress and the stress biology that we have. Building attention, emotional literacy, and using reframing. And of course, mindfulness and meditation build this out massively. So I'm going to finish up there and let you conclude, Huss. But as you move away from this now, and I apologize that we didn't get to use more of the breakout rooms, but I'm really intensely interested, just if you want to come on and complete on anything, is what is the thing you learned today? And more importantly, how do you use that to make a difference, either to yourself or to people around you? And that's where I think I'll leave it, Huss.
So at this point in time, anyone, if you feel free to unmute yourself if you want to talk about what you learned today and how you intend to use that learning in the next few weeks, months, the rest of your life.
This is Joanna. So actually, I really have in my mind like the picture of the red car and the red spot and the blue area. So then now on, I think my big learning is always thinking, am I in my red zone? How I'm gonna move to my blue zone? How I'm gonna move to my blue zone? Beautiful. And recognize that I am in that area and then try to move to my blue zone. So thank you so much.
Joanna, beautiful statement. And can I add one thing to it? When I teach schools this often, it's a temptation now that you've got this language, when you recognize, maybe your partner at home, Huss, do not do this to your wife. You say, you're in your red zone. The weird thing is when you identify someone else's red zone, it makes it worse. There's something about, we have to self-identify, or we give the opportunity to the other person. Where are you now? What's your